Hi. Sorry I missed you last week. I had some problems, and apparently some of you couldn't hear me. So we're going to try those three books again, which now hopefully you can hear me say them. We've got one. Leave me alone. Kind of feels like me sometimes. And puppy truck. It's a puppy and a truck. That's so cute. And then we're going to do the fourth chapter of the Boxcar Children. So if you have not read the other three chapters yet, ask your parents to do that for you, or you can look at the last videos that I read the first three chapters in, okay? Okay. Let's do it. Leave me alone. In this book, you're going to look for a little boy and a bear and a goat and an alien. What? Leave me alone. Words and Pictures by Vera, Brosgol. Leave me alone. Once there was an old woman. She lived in a small village in a small house with a very big family. Winter was coming. That meant she had some very important knitting to do. But it wasn't getting done. Her grandchildren were very curious about her knitting. Were you supposed to hit the ball with a stick? Could you eat it? Could you make your brother eat it? Why did the ball get smaller and smaller and smaller as you chased it? The old woman was at the end of her rope. So she made her bed as neatly as she could. She swept the floorboards until they more or less shone. She drank tea from her samovar. She packed up her things in a big sack, and as she left, she shouted back. Can you guess what she shouted? Leave me alone! The old woman walked through the deep, dark forest. She made a fire so that she could see what she was doing. Then she sat down and began to knit. The bear family was very curious about the light from her fire and about what she might taste like. Leave me alone, the old woman shouted. But they didn't listen, because bears don't speak English. So she picked up her sack and left. The old woman climbed up the mountainside. It was cold, so she found a small sheltered place. Then she sat down and began to knit. The mountain goats were excited to have a visitor, especially one that brought snacks. Can you see the goats eating her yarn? Leave me alone, the old woman shouted. But the goats were too busy fighting over the red ones, which they all agreed were the best. So she picked up her sack and left. The old woman climbed higher and higher up the mountain. She reached the top and climbed onto the moon. She found a rock that was shaped like a chair. She sat down and began to knit. The little green moon men had never seen a woman before, old or otherwise. They examined her with handheld scanners that went beep boop. "Leave me alone!" the old woman shouted. But the little green men couldn't hear her because they didn't have any ears. So she picked up her sack and left through a wormhole. The void on the other side of the wormhole was very dark and very, very quiet. She was absolutely, completely, utterly alone. It was perfect. Soon she had no more yarn and 30 little sweaters. And she was alone. She put the 30 sweaters into her big sack. She swept the void until it was a nice, neat, matte black. She had a cup of tea from her samovar. Then she picked up the sack and left through another wormhole. When she came out the other side, everything was right where she'd left it. And she didn't say a word. The end. Next. I know you've been waiting for this because it's so ridiculous. Puppy Truck! Words and Pictures by Brian Pinkney. Look on the back. It says, "Vroom beep bark," because that's what a puppy truck would say. Vroom beep bark. There's a squirrel. Puppy truck. Carter wanted a puppy. He got a truck. So he pet it and put a leash around it. Vroom beep bark. Can you say vroom beep bark? He led the truck to the park. Vroom beep bark. Stop! Puppy truck's chasing the squirrel. Puppy truck, where are you? Do you see Puppy Truck? Over here? There? Where? Here? Vroom beep bark. My puppy truck. Vroom beep bark. So Puppy Truck led the way. Vroom! Beep beep. What's next? Bark! They were so dirty, they went home and had a wash. Splish splash. They were so hungry, they ate some nuts and bolts. Chomp, 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 munch. They were so tired, they parked for the night. Vroomby. Vroomby. Vroomby bark. Vroomby meow. Look. It's a kitty truck. The end. Okay. Time to read chapter 4 of the Boxcar Children. Let me turn off the light. Then you can listen. Last time, all the children were in the woods and it started to rain. And they found a boxcar, which is part of a train to sleep in. And Henry left, and he's going to come back. Chapter 4, Henry has 2 surprises. Jessie whispered, "Keep still." The 3 children did not say a word. They sat quietly in the boxcar looking at the bushes. I wonder if it's a bear, thought Benny. Soon something came out. But it wasn't a bear. It was a dog, which hopped along on 3 legs, crying softly and holding up a front paw. It's all right, said Jessie. It's only a dog, but I think he is hurt. The dog looked up and saw the children, and then he wagged his tail. Poor dog, said Jessie. Are you lost? Come over here and let me look at your paw. The dog hopped over to the boxcar, and the children got out. Jessie looked at the paw and said, Oh dear, you poor dog, there's a big thorn in your foot. The dog stopped crying and looked up at Jessie. Good dog, said Jessie. I can help you, but maybe it will hurt. The dog looked up at Jessie and wagged his tail again. Violet, ordered Jessie, please wet my handkerchief in the brook. Jessie sat down on the stump and took the dog in her lap. She patted him and gave him a little piece of bread. So she's helping the doggy? Then she began to pull out the thorn. It was a long thorn, but the dog did not make any noise. Jessie pulled and pulled, and at last the thorn came out. Violet had a wet handkerchief ready. Jessie put it around the dog's paw, and he looked up at her as he wagged his tail a little. He wants to say thank you, Jessie, cried Violet. He is a good dog not to cry. Yes, he is, agreed Jessie. Now I'd better hold him for a while so that he will lie down and rest his leg. We could surprise Henry, remarked Benny. Now we have a dog. So we can, said Jessie, but that was not my surprise. I was going to get a lot of blueberries for supper. Can't we look for blueberries while you hold the dog? Asked Violet. Yes, you can, said Jessie. Look over there by the big trees. Benny and Violet ran over to look. Oh, Jessie, cried Benny, did you ever see so many blueberries? I guess 5 blueberries. No, I guess 10 blueberries. Jessie laughed. I guess there are more than 5 or 10, Benny, she said. Get a clean towel and pick them into it. For a while, Jessie watched Benny and Violet picking blueberries. Most of Benny's blueberries are going into his mouth, she thought with a laugh, but maybe that's just as well. He won't get so hungry waiting for Henry to come back with the milk. She carried the dog over to the children and sat down beside them, the dog on her lap. With her help, the towel soon was full of blueberries. I wish we had some dishes, Jessie said. Then we could have blueberries with milk. Never mind, said Violet. When Henry comes, we can eat some blueberries and then take a drink of milk. When Henry came, he had some heavy bundles. He had 4 bottles of milk in a bag, a loaf of brown bread, and also some fine yellow cheese. He looked at the dog. Where did you get that fine dog? He cried. He came to us, said Benny. He is a surprise for you. Henry went over to the dog, who wagged his tail. Henry patted him and said, He ought to be a good watchdog. Why is the handkerchief on his foot? He had a big thorn in his foot, answered Violet, and Jessie took it out and put it on the handkerchief. It hurt him, but he did not cry or howl. His name is Watch, remarked Benny. Oh, is it? Said Jessie, laughing. Watch is a good name for a watchdog. Did you bring some milk? Asked Benny, looking hungrily at the bottles. I should say I did, replied Henry. 4 bottles. Poor old Benny, said Jessie. We'll have dinner now. Or is it supper? Benny seems always hungry to me. It must be supper, said Henry, for soon we'll have to go to bed. Tomorrow we can eat 3 times, said Jessie. Now Jessie liked to have things in order, and so she put the laundry bag on some pine needles for a tablecloth. Then she cut the loaf of brown bread into 5 big pieces. The cheese was cut into 4. Dogs don't like cheese, remarked Benny. The poor little boy was glad, too, for he was very hungry. Dogs love cheese. She's wrong. Violet put the 4 bottles of milk on the table, and Jessie put some blueberries and cheese at each plate. Blueberries, cried Henry. Jessie, you had 2 surprises for me. I'm sorry we haven't any cups, Jessie said. We'll have to drink out of the bottles. Now all come and sit down. So supper began. Look, Benny, said Henry, you take some blueberries, then eat some brown bread, then some cheese, then take a drink of milk. It's good, said Benny. He began to put more blueberries into his mouth. The dog had supper, too. Jessie gave him bread as he lay on the ground beside her, and he drank milk out of her hand. When supper was over, there was some milk left in each bottle. We'll have the rest of the milk for breakfast, said Jessie. Tonight we're going to sleep on beds. Let's get some pine needles now. Soon the children had a big pile. Henry jumped into the boxcar, and Jessie gave him the pine needles. He made 4 beds in one end of the car. This side is the bedroom, said Jessie. What will the other side be? Asked Benny. The other side? Asked Jessie. Let me think. I guess that will be the sitting room, and maybe some of the time it will be the kitchen. Then she said, Come now, come and get washed. She took the cake of soap and went down to the brook. This'll be fun, Benny, said Violet. We'll splash our paws in the brook just like the little brown bear does. She knew that Benny did not like to be washed. The children were all very hot, so they were glad to splash in the cold water. Benny put cold water and soap on his face with the others and dried his hands on a towel. We'll have to have a line to dry the towels on, said Jessie. So she took the string out of the laundry bag and tied it to one end of the tree. The other end of the string she tied to the boxcar. This made a good clothesline. When she had washed one towel and Violet had washed the other one, they hung both towels on the clothesline. It looks like home, said Henry. See the washing? He laughed. Jessie was thinking. We ought to get some water to drink before we go to bed, she said. But what shall we put it in? Let's put all the milk into 2 bottles, said Henry. Then we can fill the other 2 with water. Good, said Jessie. You go alone to the fountain, Henry. You can hide if anyone comes along. Henry went out very quietly and soon came back with 2 bottles full of cold water. Benny drank a little, but he was almost asleep. The other children helped him into the boxcar. Then they all climbed in, Jessie carrying the dog. He lay down at once beside her. It is so hot that we'll leave the door open, said Henry. Soon they were fast asleep, dog and all. The moon came up, but they did not see it. This was the first time in 4 days that they could go to sleep at night, as children should. And that's the end of chapter 4. And those are all the stories that I had tonight. Are your fingers ready to sing? One hand, loosen up those fingers. The other hand, loosen up those fingers. Shake them a little bit. And practice. Ooh, where's the camera? Where's the camera? It's right there. Ready? I love you. Goodbye. I love you. Goodbye. I love you. I love you. I love you. Goodbye. I'll see you next time